Okay. Welcome to Take Your Lead podcast. I am super excited and honored that you would be part of a community of leaders who are intentional and purposeful about their growth. Thank you so much for your reviews and rating the content and for spreading the word to the leaders who actually listen to the content with their fellow colleagues and the teams that they lead. We really enjoy because we know that it adds value not only to you, but to those that you lead. A reminder again that the episode notes for today's episode are available, and you definitely need to go to www.mzwandilemakakola.com to download the episode notes, which will help you with application. I am extremely excited on this beautiful podcast episode to be joined by an impeccable, terrific leader, a sought after global speaker. Mike is not only an entrepreneur, writer, and keynote speaker, but he hosts an amazing podcast, which is one of the leading podcasts in Africa within the business and digital space. And I'm so excited this beautiful episode to be joined and have a conversation with him about building an impactful, digitally relevant leadership model. And just to pull from all the years of experience that he has. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us on Take Your Lead podcast.
Thank you, my friend. Jeepers, I feel very honored to be here. I need to package you and take that intro that you just did wherever I go from now on. I'll just take the recording and replay it if that's okay. It's about the best intro I've ever had. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man. I'm truly excited to have this conversation because I know it's going to add great value to our leadership community. But maybe to tee it off, because I know you're also an avid golfer, I'm not going to ask what's your handicap lest I expose you or I put myself under pressure. Maybe just to tee it off, maybe just to introduce yourself as to who you are and maybe kindly tell us more about yourself to those who do not know you and some of the transitions that you've made in your leadership that have landed you where you are.
Sure. Mzwandile, so thanks. I mean, it's always, I find it a little bit embarrassing telling the story because it doesn't feel that special or remarkable to me, but I feel like I'm the luckiest person you've ever had on this show. But I was kind of an entrepreneur by mistake. So therefore also sort of a leader by mistake. It was never really by design. I found myself sort of in my mid-20s immensely unhappy in the job that I was in, and I sort of arrogantly always assumed that I could do a better job than my bosses, which I soon discovered when I was the boss that it's harder than it seems. But I think I grew up in a household that wasn't particularly entrepreneurial, so I didn't really have entrepreneurial role models. But very quickly learned once I was running my own business that A, it was an extraordinary privilege to do so, but B, that I just loved it. Like I loved crafting an offering. I loved building a team. I loved figuring out brand positioning and values. I loved selling what we did to customers. I even loved the tough stuff. I loved the difficult meetings. I loved the conflict. I loved solving problems. I probably didn't like finance all that much. I'm not very good at reading financial statements. That was definitely a weakness. But I started a business called Cerebra in my mid-20s, and the timing was good for that business, and it grew well. And then I sold that business in my mid-30s to a company called WPP. And I left the business at the end of 2018, and then took a sabbatical to further my studies, which I really enjoyed, and did some work around the area that you are an expert in and really knowledgeable around impact and purpose in a leadership capacity. And I am looking to transition now more concertedly into the space of leadership development in a very disruptive and complex world. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's sort of what I've been doing.
I love that. I just want to pull two threads from your transitions and your journey thus far. The first one being that you said you didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial family, so you didn't have an entrepreneurial background. So how did you break out of the shell and the box where you were not directly exposed to it? Or what happened that caused you to feel like I can actually, there's more? Especially you mentioned that you were working under your boss and you somewhat felt some type of way that I can actually do this. And what are some of those triggers that pushed you out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a fascinating topic, right? Because what we're really talking about is sort of nature and nurture, right? Like the circumstances we're born into and the things we're exposed to as we grow up. I mean, my dad was a very hardworking diesel mechanic by trade, and he worked his way up through the construction industry into sort of a management role. But because of the nature of his work, it wasn't something we really spoke about around the dinner table. You know, I think by the time he got home from site or from the mine, he just didn't want to talk about work at all, you know. And my mom was is until very recently just retired a public school teacher, grade one teacher. So I saw more of her life and her work life, and to this day, I think I'm very inspired by teachers and teaching, and I think it's part of my DNA. My aunt is a teacher, my mom is a teacher. It's something that I A, value highly as a skill, but B, I think I've always kind of been a closet teacher, even in my entrepreneurial roles. You know, that was the part of the work I always enjoyed the most. But I think in the early part of my career, I was just like, there's no other way to put it. I was desperately unhappy and very uncomfortable, and uncomfortable because I had the sense that there were parts of my personality and parts of my skill set and parts of my, I guess, like my passion that I wasn't exercising and wasn't able to kind of discover or explore. So if you ask me like why I became an entrepreneur, it's just I was incredibly uncomfortable. It was a it was a release mechanism. I just had to, and I'm really grateful that I succeeded because, well, I mean, relatively succeeded, but you know, I don't know where I would have landed up if I didn't. You know, probably very, very unhappy middle-aged white man. Like, so like sort of pretty tough that I had a great opportunity and a great network to support building something that was of some value. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love how you mentioned that it was discomfort that caused you to really step out, and boldness. Maybe speak to the role that courage had to play within your transition and decision making, especially within the backdrop of leadership.
Yeah, look, Mzwandile, I think again you've probably been very kind here because I think there's quite a fine line between courage and bravery and outright stupidity, right? And I was definitely more on the side of stupidity and ignorance. But sometimes ignorance is bliss. Sometimes what you don't know can't hurt you. And you know, when I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, this seems to be a common denominator in many of their journeys, is that sometimes not knowing is an advantage because in a way it enables you to do to take steps that perhaps a more educated or more experienced person wouldn't do. And you know, there's that wonderful saying that all progress in society depends on unreasonable people, you know, and I would argue that maybe also kind of in some cases unqualified people. Sometimes when we don't have the burden of thinking about things in a particular way, or we don't assume things, sometimes we're able to achieve the remarkable or the extraordinary because of that. And that's certainly not always true. Of course, you don't want a neurosurgeon that's operating on you with no experience, right? Like this doesn't apply to every space. But certainly in new industries and in new frontiers and in new innovations, it can be a strength because you aren't, my friend Richard Mulholland talks about you're not burdened with legacy. You're not kind of thinking about everything in the way everybody else always thought about it. So that, I mean, that was certainly one part of it, but the early parts weren't easy and they weren't good. Like for about 6 months, I racked up a lot of debt, and I felt pretty ashamed of not being able to make it a success. And I, again, got very lucky at like at the right time with the right client, and that resulted in kind of the first legitimizing of the offering. And once you have one client, then it's easy, because then the next client you can tell that hey, this client's already paid for it, so it must be. But yeah, I'm the first person to admit that if it weren't for the support of family, and if it weren't for the power of networks in my life, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I'm aware that there's so many entrepreneurs out there that have amazing ideas, wonderful gifts and skills, but aren't part of a network, don't have a kind of a base of privilege to operate from. And privilege takes many different forms. But sometimes just having a phone to pick up and call somebody that you know in an industry, or get a recommendation or a referral. So I think one of the things that I did learn is that the most successful entrepreneurs and leaders in my life weren't afraid to ask. And not just ask for help, but ask questions, and ask for connections, and ask for, I mean, I love the way that we connected randomly, because I think I was hosting a conversation between, I was actually kind of, I guess, for all intents and purposes, an MC on a call, but there was an immediate chemistry between you and I. And what did you do? You asked, right? Like, a lot of people would assume, maybe he's busy, or maybe whatever, the most interesting people in the world right now, the people that are asking.
Wow.
Asking, and you'll receive. You'll be surprised at what you'll get if you ask for it. And I think, and I don't mean in an ethereal or supernatural sense. I mean just like in a literal sense. Like, just send out 100 emails and maybe 3 of them will work. But life's too short not to ask.
Podcast family, this is just pure gold. The past 2 minutes, I encourage you to just pause and rewind. And Mike just shared strong nuggets right there about asking, and which is actually the next question I was going to ask him, pun intended, as to maybe to young leaders and entrepreneurs who want to start. Where do they start? Because I think one of the things, and there's an amazing recent newsletter you sent out where you were talking about starting and narrating your story of fishing, and how you had your fly ready, but it was still in the boat, and how you can never catch a fish if it's not in the water. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in a place where they've got amazing ideas. They want to change the world. They want to impact society and do all these great things, but they're not too sure how to start. In fact, I think the complexity of how big it is scares them, and they end up not doing anything at all.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a point that I'm really passionate about. And again, I want to acknowledge that this might not be true for everyone, and it might not be true for every industry. So I don't want to pretend that I have a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter solution to how to start a business. Absolutely not. Yeah. But I do think that a lot of the business books and the business manuals, the stuff that's taught to us in kind of high school or university contexts, are written by people in established economies, in very mature economies. And in a very mature economy, there are generally carved out spaces for entrepreneurs and for businesses and for styles of businesses. And there's established and mature funding mechanisms, whether it's the bank or venture capital, or, kind of whatever it might be. And, everybody says you must have a distinct plan, and you need a 12-page business outline, and you need your financials. And fair enough, in a very mature economy, that's often the case. But we live in a crazy awesome place. We live in a place where the most rewarded characteristics of entrepreneurs are tenacity and perseverance and experimentation, and the ability to get punched 7 times in the face and still get up the 8th time. Those are your grit is. Those are the things that if I was writing a business book for entrepreneurs in South Africa, I'd write, those are the things you need. Maybe even before, because sometimes we spend all that time on a business plan and all that time trying to find the right funding from the right, and actually if you just started the thing and tested a small version of it, like it would have been, a gentleman that I was supposed to interview a couple of weeks ago and actually canceled on him, and I have to pick up with him again, but a gentleman that started a mobile car wash business, Robert, I think his surname is Mzwandile, great entrepreneurial story. Moby Wash, I think is the app. And like a classic example of just start. You get in your own car, with your own cleaning equipment and go and wash a person's car and get a sense of what that experience is like, and then wash another car and learn from that, and then hire a person who can. But he scaled from the manual process of being the person in his own car washing everybody else's cars and realized this sucks. Like, it's hard to make money this way, so I need to get smarter about it, and I need to improve this, or I need to change that, or I need to get economies of scale here, or I need to get my clients to market for me there. Before long, you have an amazing business, right? And even he was saying, I look back and I can't remember when it was tough, because now it feels like it's obvious, but, if I consider our context and how complex it is, and how many variables there are to consider in terms of who gets the right opportunity and when and how, that it's a double-edged sword, because as tough as that is, that also means that there is this absolute wealth of opportunity for people with the right attitudes and the right kind of, like I said, tenacity and perseverance. And it's not a guarantee of success, but it is a really highly correlated enabler of success. Yeah, so I mean that's one of the things that I guess I would, and again, that's not true for everyone. If you're going to go look for funding from a bank for earth moving equipment, you probably want to go with a plan, right? It's because that's the kind of mature system that's going to reward that sort of preparation. But for many of us, like, sometimes you just have to start, and done is always better than perfect, right? So rather get a 60% version of it live than a perfect version of it that's not live,
Love that. I love that. I just want to borrow one word which you mentioned, especially within the backdrop of 2020, which was a interesting year. A lot that we can say. In fact, maybe to put you on the spot, if you were to define 2020 in one word, how would you define it?
Can I use two words? Can I say shit show? No, I think the word I will use, and it's interesting because I had a wonderful coffee this morning with a real kind of champion of industry talking about this very thing. And the word I would probably use is reframe, right? 2020 has given us an opportunity to rethink the things we really think are important. And I mean across the board, whether you're a CEO of a big business that thinks you're immune to thinking about the societies you operate in as systems and interdependent networks of connected people, all the way through to me reconsidering whether it's more important for me to be doing a talk today or making pancakes for my toddler. Like, I think we've all been offered an opportunity in extraordinary circumstances to reevaluate our priorities and the things that are important to us. Now, I'm aware, I'm saying this from the position of extraordinary privilege. I get to sit there on my couch in my secure complex going, I really need to rethink my priorities, where like a whole lot of people are just trying to find their next meal. Like, I completely understand and appreciate the position that I'm operating from. And for many people, just the privilege of even being able to think about the situation is a privilege. But I do think that, my hope, my sincere hope is that, especially from a business perspective, that we are thinking about creating value and creating businesses in slightly different ways off the back of this experience, acknowledging that, like, if we fail to create value in broader communities around us, and those communities fail, then our businesses fail as well. Nobody wants to be a rich person in a failed state. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So I think it's forced us to think about South Africa in a much broader context. You very quickly lose the ability to assume that you're the only person that matters, and your family are the only person that matters, or your business is the only business that matters. You very quickly are reminded that you're part of a system, and if that system fails, everybody fails. So what is my responsibility in the system?
That's beautiful. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. The word I wanted you to speak to within that backdrop is resilience, because I think one of, especially to entrepreneurs, and you spoke about the soft skills that are necessary beyond the business plan, et cetera, et cetera. But I think resilience is one of the things that every entrepreneur needs if they're going to be successful. And how does it look for an entrepreneur who's starting, for them to be resilient even when things are not seemingly coming together?
Yeah, look, I mean, I want to say right up front that there's potential hypocrisy in my answer here because I'm not always resilient myself. Sometimes I also feel like crumbling up in a ball and wrapping myself in a blanket and cuddling my dashant in the morning because, things just seem a bit overwhelming. But so I think in any normal period, I mean, obviously this has been a slightly abnormal period, but in any normal period, I think resilience comes down to a couple of things. Number one, being able to control or moderate the feedback that you get from external sources when it comes to what you believe you should be doing or achieving or working towards. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that every entrepreneur needs some sort of a direction that they're operating in. Some of us call that vision, some of us call that purpose. But essentially, we're talking about a vector. We're talking about something that kind of pushes you in a specific direction. If your whole life is spent worrying about what other people think about that and whether they're happy and whether everybody agrees or thinks you're cool or whatever else, you're going to be very unhappy. Like if you're not making somebody unhappy, you're probably not doing a good job. Like if you're not upsetting at least a few people. But I think one of the fastest ways to failure is to try and make everybody happy all of the time, right? Unfortunately, you kind of need to pick which audience is gonna not like what you do, but that's okay. Like if you have a good work-life balance and you're healthy and your family's healthy, then it doesn't really matter if you upset a few people on the route, as long as you're sticking to that vector. So I think that's the first thing, is trying to make people happy all of the time. Is choosing to be very careful about which feedback you take is an ingredient of resilience. I think another ingredient of resilience is treating failure or mistakes as lessons, right? So instead of getting defeatist and going, I'm useless and I can't do this, going, what is there in this moment for me to learn? What lesson can I impart on myself? That's the second thing. Another, I think, a critical component of resilient leaders is the ability to question their own beliefs and assumptions about the world. Like if you're going to be stubborn and narrow-minded, and if you're going to only have one view about something and not allow any evidence to change your mind, you're going to have a pretty unpleasant life in the world we're in at the moment, right? It's just too complicated. It's too diverse. It's too multifaceted. It's too nuanced to have a simple view of the world. And I think your ability as a leader to kind of hold things in balance and to manage conflict in terms of your own ideologies and beliefs, that's a really powerful way to maintain resilience and to create kind of mental shock absorbers for, and then I think the last thing is just is being willing to lean on people for support. There's this really strange narrative around entrepreneurs that they're these like champions who are like never go through tough times and have like the pictures on Instagram of the fancy car and the one, and that's bull. Like for me, the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who takes full accountability for creating value. Wow. That's what an entrepreneur is, right? And that means that you pay a price. It's hard. It's really, really difficult. Like it's got nothing to do with how much money you make or whatever. It means that you're willing to, the buck stops with you in terms of whatever value it is that you're trying to create. And I think that like entrepreneurs think that in the process of doing so, they can't rely on other people. They can't phone up a friend and go, I'm really struggling. Or lean on advice or support, or there's a sense that they have to kind of just know what to do all the time, and that's just not true. Like it's a very, very lonely job, and you need to make sure that you have the right support systems in place to be resilient.
Brilliant. Podcast family, again, the past 3 minutes or so, pure gold. I just love your philosophy of leadership and how you make it so practical and so applicable. It's just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's adding great value to me. I'm trying to catch up, taking notes. It's amazing. Maybe to your current space where you're at now, maybe what are you currently learning? I'm not gonna preempt you, but I know that you recently cut a long-standing relationship that you had for some time. Maybe just to
my saucy little social media. Yeah. So Mzwandile is referring to, I decided to invest in a little bit of clickbait. Yeah, I posted an update that I'd ended a relationship for 13 years, but I was actually just talking about Facebook. So it's not that big a deal. But I think, I think, I've just turned 40. It's been a strange year kind of for everyone. I think what I'm learning at the moment, Swadile, is that action really matters, and that a lot of what I've spent the last kind of 20 years doing is creating the platform for real action. And I think a lot now about things like legacy and things like how do you want people to talk about you when you're not here? What words do you want people to remember you by, or what actions? So I'm thinking a lot about legacy, especially in a context like this year. And I just think like there's just so much room for impact. There's so much room for significant social change, and I know everybody talks about it, so I'm, even as I'm saying it, I'm wary about, like, it just sounds so like but like I don't know how to think about creating a new business or a new venture or new partnerships if that's not a part of it. If you're not doing that, specifically in South Africa right now, I mean, like, talk about a place that is ripe for opportunity and ripe for intervention and ripe for value creation. Like this place is like the most fertile ground in the world for this kind of work, right? If you're not thinking about that in this context, then I don't know what you're doing. So yeah, I'm thinking a lot about that. And I think I'm learning also quite a lot about like myself and how I work and what I'm motivated by. And not all of those are nice lessons. One discovers quite quickly the role that ego and that kind of thing play in the leaders in the entrepreneurs framework. But I'm trying to be a little bit more deliberate about that and understand more my own personal drivers and triggers and use them more constructively towards kind of the sort of work that I want to be doing, as opposed to wasted time or energy.
I know it's
sorry, that was a really flimsy answer.
No, it's actually not. It's together. It's really together. And I know you're still processing it and navigating your way through it. And I heard you mention the word significance, and maybe when you've discovered it, we'll talk more as to how does the one then move from living a life of success to a life of significance, because I think this is the transition within legacy, where you want to add value to others, add value to the country, to society, to communities. And I think this is the crux of leadership, where the focus moves from me, myself, and I, but to how can I add value to Mike? How can I add value to what Mike is doing as he continues to add value to the people within his sphere of influence?
Yeah, look, I think I used to be very like militant about this, like the success versus significance thing. And it was deeply inspired by a mentor of mine when I was much younger, who asked me this question once: do you want to be successful or do you want to be significant? So I spent a lot of time thinking about the semantics of those two things. But I think what I've learned is that there are a lot of people out there that achieve a level of significance, certainly by in terms of kind of other people's definition of what success looks like, who are in and of themselves deeply unsatisfied or deeply unhappy, and this is going to sound like a little bit selfish or a little self-serving. Like, I want to be happy. I want to be super happy. And I've realized that the things that make me happy are, I like being in charge of my own time, which means that I like being able to, if I want to wake up in the morning and go, I just don't feel like doing anything today, I can do that. And that's extraordinarily valuable to me, right? I like creating things. I like working with people who like creating things. I like having difficult conversations. These are the things that make me happy. So for me, like, I've realized that I can be as successful as I want to be or as rich as I want to be. If I'm not happy, like, it kind of, all it is sort of a poster, you know? And so I'm more interested right now in what I'm finding really fulfilling and enriching, because I know that the best version of me, the most impactful version of me, is the happiest and most fulfilled and healthiest version of me. So if I want to be impactful and I can do that, but it comes at a massive cost.
Yeah.
If I'm not, and you know, Mzwandile, my view on the world, my philosophy on life is that I don't get another chance at this. Like, this is my one go. Like, I don't believe that I'm going to be reincarnated as a caterpillar, or that I have some eternal destiny beyond this. I don't believe that. I believe that this is it.
Yeah.
There's no dress rehearsal. This is my one go at this.
Yeah.
So live the hell out of it, right? Yeah. Like, live balls to the wall. Let's go. Yeah. And I think, you know, that helps me, I think, focus more on being very present and thinking about the things that enable me to be as impactful as possible. And one of the big things that does that is making sure that I'm fulfilled. And that means generally it's not about stuff. Yeah. It's not about where I live. Yeah. It's not about the home I'm in. Like, none of those things actually become material. It's more kind of, am I fulfilled, you know?
Yeah. That's beautiful. There's something you mentioned, I think twice in conversation within your lab, which is quite strange, which is conflict resolution and having tough conversations. And I just want you to just speak a bit around that within the space of leadership, because I think part of leadership is having tough conversations.
It's the most underrated part of it. Mzwandile, if you could pay me to have arguments all day long, I would. Like, but I mean arguments, I mean debates, I mean rigorous, difficult, robust debate, not fighting like people do on Twitter, where your people are like this, your people are like this, you know, my rabbit guard, my duck guard, my rabbit guard. None of that is useful. That all that does is push us further into our corners. But when you and I, who are two people that respect each other deeply and admire each other's views of the world, can find something we disagree on and have a tough conversation about it, and come out of it and still respect each other, you know what happens then? We build societies. We build a world. Like, that's democracy, right? Like, that's how it's supposed to work. Democracy is not us all agreeing with each other. It's us being able to find our common ground and respect each other's differences and build societies that are constructive and that value people and that value people's contributions. And we have entirely lost the ability to debate and have tough conversations and have difficult discussions. And I mean, I want to tackle all those topics that are the hardest to tackle. I want to get into them. Let's talk about colonialization. Let's talk about apartheid. Let's talk about racism and our inherent biases. Let's get into that stuff, because our refusal to acknowledge the nuance in these circumstances pushes us all further into our own fear corners, right? Like, into the darkness. And you know what happens in the darkness? Nothing happens there. Nobody gets anywhere. So we need to be, I just think, like, we've lost the ability to separate people's ideas from the people. We've lost I mean, I have people in my life who I love dearly, whose ideas I hate. Oh my God, their ideas are terrible. I love them as people. And I have people whose ideas I love, who I hate. They're terrible people, but they still have amazing ideas. And I'm able to do both of those things. Like, a leader must be able to do that. And to be able to listen to somebody's ideas without making a character judgment on that person, you know? I think these are tough things that we're going to have to learn to do if we're going to fix what's wrong. We've got some major, major problems in society.
Right.
And if we don't learn how to do this better, more constructively, man, I really worry about like what's going to happen in the next couple of years. I really do.
I think you spoke to the next question I was going to ask you. I've seen, Mike, how you connect with crowds around the world, different stages, how you just work it and how you connect with people from different walks of life. It's so amazing to really, and so inspiring to see how meticulous you are in connecting with people. And you spoke a bit to that in what you were just saying now. And I just wanted to ask you as to how do you do it? How do you connect so well with people from different ethnic groups, people with different preferences and different beliefs, and yet you're able to connect, and the importance of that in the life of a leader?
Yeah. So, I mean, so it's important for me to qualify here that this was not always my way of being. Like, I grew up in a very conservative household, a very small world of kind of Benoni in the East Rand of Johannesburg, not the most forward-thinking or progressive town in the world, right? And um, I've had to unlearn a lot of stuff that I held to be very true and very precious and very important to my worldview. And it's difficult to do that. It's physically painful, it's traumatic to unbelieve your core beliefs, the things that you believe to be most true about the world, which incidentally are what we inherit from our parents mostly, right? Or the cultural context that we're in. But I think the more I learn, the less I realize I know.
Mm.
And because I'm an inherently curious person, I want to find out more stuff. And the only way I can do that is to connect with people who are different to me. And the only way I could do that is to find people that have different ideas to mine. And most people just want to be heard. Most people just want to, um, they want to be able to express an opinion or an idea and not be called like evil or dumb or left wing or right wing or fascist or socialist or whatever it might be, just for expressing. And I think certainly we've got to be careful here, because maybe there's some ideas that are so destructive that they shouldn't be entertained. And this is where we can get into quite a deep discussion around the nature of free speech and free expression and what should be free and what shouldn't. And I mean, obviously that's a whole nother kettle of fish we could open, but we won't do that now. But the point, I think, is like, I'm curious, but I'm not curious because I think I have to be. I'm curious because I genuinely am curious. It's not like, oh, I really need to pretend to be interested in these people. I'm like, I want to know, like, what makes you tick? Like, what's interesting to you? What is your worldview? How is it different to mine? And what are the reasons for that? And what could I learn about my worldview from yours? I just think that that's the most interesting way to live.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Mike. Maybe as we bring in our plane for landing, leadership is, if you were to fill in the blank, leadership is, what one word would leadership be to you?
Accountability.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. I think that's
Wow.
leadership is being prepared to be. It's you're where the buck stops. That's what it is. Like that, leadership is. We used to have a saying in Cerebra, in the business that I used to run. We used to say that shit flows uphill, right? Like leadership comes with amazing perks. You get the nice salary, you get the lack of market, but you, like, the buck stops with you. When somebody in your organization in the junior levels or the lower tiers, when they make a mistake, that's not their problem. That's a management or enablement or education problem. You didn't do your job, right? Like, if something happens that somebody wasn't empowered to do a better job, that's my problem, not their problem, right? Like, leadership is not the privilege of abstaining responsibility. It's the privilege of having responsibility. It's being accountable. And if you look at the leaders that we've got in the world at the moment as role models, it's exactly the opposite of that. we've started to believe that leadership is having the power
Yeah.
never to be responsible.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of that.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Maybe your parting thoughts, but before your parting thoughts, anything exciting that you're currently working on, any passion projects that you are currently busy with?
Yeah, so hopefully there'll be a nice announcement this month of a little project I'm working on with a colleague in the PR space, which should be a little an interesting little business idea. And then Beyond Binary is evolving. It's my sort of consulting project, and looking to launch some new programs pretty soon and into 2021. So look out for that. Yeah, parting thoughts. I'm aware that there are probably a lot of people that are watching this that are feeling cuck. Like, there's no other way to put it. This has been just a really tough year, and a lot of people have taken a massive emotional knock. And like, I've had some pretty dark and awful moments, and I lead this amazing privileged life, right? Like, I can only imagine how tough it's been for some people. And I guess what I wanted to say is just like, take heart. There are people that care about you. There are opportunities that are available. I want to encourage you to persevere, to take that, just get up again. Like, even if you're getting punched for the 7 times, get up again. It will come to pass. It will get better. It really does. And I'm aware that there are a lot of people that are probably taking a lot of strain, but there is light. So take heed. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mike. Where can our podcast family,
Thanks for the
where can they connect with you and be able to be part of all the amazing things that you're doing?
Best place is probably my website, mikestopforth.com. But then obviously I make a lot of noise on Twitter as well, and I'm on LinkedIn, and so any of those is a good place, I guess, to connect. And then there's links to the podcast on all of those platforms, so that's a nice place to sort of connect with content and conversations that I'm having with really interesting people. So yeah.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you so much for taking time and adding value to me and to our podcast family. I really appreciate you, and to our podcast listeners as well. Thank you so much for being part of this episode. But thank you so much, Mike. This was really, 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 really.
Thank you, dude. I mean, like, on behalf of all of your listeners, thanks for putting this together. Right? Like, this is magic stuff. So thanks for being brave and resilient and courageous and tenacious enough to put these kinds of things together. It's a massive gift to everybody.
Everybody, thank you so much. Podcast family, thank you once again for being part of the episode. To download the episode notes, the link will be in the bio, or head over to www.mzwandilemakakola.com. It will help you with application, especially after all the amazing, incredible things that Mike has shared with us. You'll be able to receive the transcribed episode notes. Till we meet again, continue to take your lead as we change the world one individual at a time.